There has been a lot of controversy around genetically modified food. The supporters of GM technology say that it increases the yield, reduces the input cost, and protects the environment. Moreover, it is their claim that the food derived from GM technology is substantially equivalent to the conventional way of agriculture. But the opponents do not agree. With me today to discuss the issue is Dr. Devinder Sharma, who is a renowned food policy analyst and also the coordinator of Coalition for GM-Free India. Dr. Sharma, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Sharma, I'd like to ask you the first question. Why are you so much against the GM technology and GM food?
Because this is an unnatural food. It is basically a contamination of the food. And also, it contains tremendous risks which the human population is refusing to accept and acknowledge. Now, nature has given us abundance of food supplies. There is no dearth of food on the earth. Why are we contaminating food? Why are we making food a complex subject? Whereas food is simple, it's a romance, and it is something that we all cherish. You will see that food that we have today, the food that we all talk about today, is going to undergo tremendous change. The food that we will all be eating 10 years from now, if the genetic engineering has its way, will not be the same that what you and me are eating today.
Your fear is that we are heading for something unknown.
Well, it is like, going into the black hole. And how dangerous it can be, I think, is something which I would be willing to take that risk only if there is a kind of a disaster awaiting or there is a desperation. Now, the tragedy is that either we don't have desperation, neither there is a disaster waiting. Then why are we playing with the food? When you play with food, one, you're done damage to your environment, you're done damage to your human health. The third and foremost is you are also playing with your genetic makeup, because what the food will do into your body is something still unknown.
Dr. Sharma, the supporters of the GM technology, they say that all the claims about the harmful effects of the GM food are exaggerated, because people in the US have been eating it for over a decade and a half. They are not dying over there. So why there is so much hue and cry in our country?
Well, US is not a kind of a role model for the world, first of all. If US is a role model for us, you will be surprised that the pornography industry of America is 35 times the size of Hollywood. Should the world have it? You will be surprised that 40% Americans do not know whether the sun revolves around the earth or earth revolves around the sun. Is that the model that the world should follow? What I'm trying to say is that just to say that in US this is happening, but let me also tell you, those who say that US people are not dying, never tell us that 4 lakh people are dying every year from eating junk food. We are never told. The kind of pressures that we have to expand the market for junk food is enormous in India. But did you ever hear anybody saying that this has proven killer in America? So we try to look at what is of interest to us, and then we project that kind of imagination or that kind of a picture, and that would result in human losses, and we are not worried about it because it's taken as a collateral damage. To your question, that if Americans have been eating it, why are we worried? Well, if that is the situation, I think if Americans today, if cigarette smoking is number 2 killer in America, food is number 1 killer in America, if that's the model we want to bring into India, I have no objection. If the nation accepts that, fine. If they want to die, they should die. But the fact of the matter is that is not the model that we have to follow. India can be a healthy nation without importing or without contaminating your food supplies with genetically modified foods. You will be surprised, there's only one human clinical trial in the world till today. Even in that human clinical trial, it has been found that it is damaging to the people who consume genetically modified food. Why is the industry or the governments refraining from conducting tests to tell us how harmful it can be? Why is it so? That means clearly they want to suppress that information. So you are selling a bad product by just suppressing its ill effects that we all should know.
The biotechnology company often says that the food that they are bringing in the market has been approved by Food and Drug Administration of the US. So if that be the case, then what is your problem?
See, the United States FDA is one of the regulatory authorities. US FDA, in my understanding, is one of the corrupt bodies that US has. First, the evidence that, one gentleman in America took the US FDA to court. 44,000 pages which questioned the harmful impacts or the relevance of GM food for human health tumbled out of the cupboards there. And the US FDA didn't have anything to answer those things. In fact, it has been established very well that the scientists within the US FDA had actually posed questions which the bureaucrats turned it down. Now, if this can happen in one of the most distinguished regulatory authorities, you know what can happen in India with Genetic Engineering Approval Committee.
Is there a ground to oppose the GM food on ethical basis?
I think look at the way the genes are being now tinkering, or the food is now being tinkered with. You know, pigs, the gene from pigs have been taken out and put into cauliflower. The gene from pigs are being taken to put into rice. And you know, rice genes have gone into animals. And the human genes, the gene for milk in human beings, human females, has been now inserted into rice. And the scientists are trying to say this will take care of diarrhea in human beings. Now, all these permutation combinations have actually gone beyond the ethics that the society has been living in. And I think that is again going to create, whether it's a religious issue or whether it is going to be an ethical issue or a morality issue, that I think is also going to be infringed by genetically modified foods. And no questions are being asked. The laboratories are trying to come out with these products without even addressing these issues or letting this society debate whether this food is required for them or not required for them. Let the communities decide whether they would like to have a pig gene into cauliflower or a pig gene into rice, and why should they prefer a gene, a kind of a rice or a cauliflower with a gene of pig for that matter.
Dr. Sharma, how serious is the problem of genetic pollution, and is it some kind of an irreversible process?
The entire effort of the industry is to contaminate the world with genetic engineered products. The first and foremost is happening in agriculture. Now it is being said, you know, the way the plants are being released in India or in other countries, you know, the point is it is going beyond the control of the human society. So now it is being said, okay, now we have done the damage. So it's already contaminated, so why stop it now? So that is a kind of impression, or that is a kind of aim, or that, let's say, the industry has to see that everything is get contaminated, so then there can be no questions mark on the contamination. Now, to me, this is a very serious issue because plants have a uniqueness. Once you contaminate those plants, you are actually bringing in genetic pollution. Once you bring that genetic pollution, it can't be reverted back, because what has gone, see, for instance, when we were playing with chemicals, when you take your car out of your garage, the moment you put your pedal or you put your feet on the accelerator, the exhaust would release chemicals, molecules. Now those molecules stay in the environment for about 100 years. It is true they add on to global warming, but the fact of the matter is those molecules don't multiply. But when you genetically pollute, you have released a gene into the atmosphere. That gene is a living organism. It can multiply. So earlier the molecule was there in the environment, it was contaminating the environment, polluting the environment, what is called as chemical pollution, but it was not multiplying. Today the gene is going to multiply, so it's the biological pollution that the world will have will be much more potent, obviously, than what the chemical pollution was.
Well, the European countries in the beginning were really very much supportive of the technology, and they have just simply, let their door open and just welcomed it as some kind of a revolutionary technology. But what happened actually? Why the European countries have banned and they have become so vociferous in their opposition to GM technology?
Well, I think we need to know there is something called a shock and awe. In Europe, what happened was they were faced first with mad cow disease, and then they were faced with foot and mouth disease. Now, in both these diseases had inflicted a massive destruction of the cattle. And they had to burn cattle. Thousands and thousands of cattle were burnt alive. Now, in that particular situation, they have seen the horror of all these kinds of food and feeds. Now they realize if it can happen to animals, it can happen to human beings also. So therefore, there is a kind of that shock is reverberating in their mind, and that is why they have objected to the entry of genetically modified food. In India, we still have to look forward to that kind of a shock and awe so that people can become alert to. Indians are no better than any other population in this world. We also await people to die, then only we wake up to the threats that people have been telling. I think that is where our problem arises.
But there have been a lot of claims to be made about that the GM foods are harmful for animals, and the test actually which they have conducted in the lab. But is there any evidence to suggest that GM food is really harmful to human health?
There are ample evidence which show that BT cotton is not only harmful for the animals, but also harmful for the human beings. Now, it's very interesting. The scientists, of course, will not accept it. But if you look at what has happened in Andhra Pradesh, there was reports of hundreds of sheep and goat dying from eating the leaves of BT cotton. Then there are reports from Punjab now which say hundreds of sheep have died and goats have died because of eating of contaminated or let's say BT cotton leaves. In Haryana, we have evidence that, buffalo have died from eating cotton. There are cows now. Cows, if you leave aside a cow for grazing, you will see that the cow will avoid the field which is BT cotton, but will go into other kind of fields. Which shows even the animals have that sixth sense that they know which is good or which is bad for themselves. It's the human beings which don't have any kind of a sense. They take everything rubbish. You can push anything rubbish into their stomachs. Now, in the case of human beings, wherever farmers have been picking up, or whether workers have been picking up cotton in different areas of this country, we have seen farmers developing rashes on their bodies. There have been irritation they have been faced with. Now there are evidence that in some areas of this country, children living in an area where there was BT cotton and have been fed with BT cotton, cotton seed oil that is used as a cooking medium in India, are now suffering from astapha, irritation, and all these kinds of bronchitis and so on. Now, it has happened in an area where it wouldn't happen earlier. So now the evidence is being linked. It will take some time for us to bring out the scientific correlation as clearly as the world would require. But these are things happening, and which should be a warning that if it can happen with a crop that was only considered to be for the farmers, what will happen when we start eating BT brinjal, BT rice, or BT cauliflower, or BT tomato?
So far, we have only one genetically modified crop in the country, which is BT cotton. But now we are soon going to have BT brinjal. How concerned you are about the introduction of this particular crop?
So just one point I want to raise. So far, you had cotton, BT cotton, which was not my concern, which is not a consumer concern. It was considered to be a concern of the farmers. But now, for the first time, we will have genetically modified food on everyone's tables. Now, that is why I think the society has to wake up. Now, it's very interesting. The BT gene that has been inserted into brinjal is supposed to kill, the toxin would be produced within the fruit, and then when the insect feeds on that particular, on brinjal, it will die. Now, it's very interesting. If you were to keep in a glass pane, a glass box, one BT brinjal, and you will put some insects into that, you will see, in a day or two, all those insects dying. Imagine when you eat that BT brinjal, what will happen to your body? Scientists are telling, the companies are telling us, nothing will happen to your body. After a temperature, the toxin will break down. Please tell me, where in India do you have a housewife who's cooking brinjal by keeping a thermometer on her side? Secondly, why should you take in something where no benefit comes to you? So far, the pesticides was outside. So if a housewife was supposed to wash, be sure that the residues are not there. But now the toxin is inside. Why I'm saying is this: one scientist in America has gone on record saying that the toxin that is within the BT brinjal would be 1,000 times more than the toxin that is used in the BT sprays. There are certain biological sprays that are being used in which BT gene, BT is a bacteria, as you know, that bacteria is being used for biological sprays. When you spray that on pests, the pest will die. Now, the toxicity of that, vis-a-vis the toxicity of that particular gene in the BT brinjal, this BT brinjal will be 1,000 times more toxic than that BT spray. Please tell me, where is the urgency or desperation that human beings must eat BT brinjal?
How concerned you are that the introduction of genetic engineering and genetically modified crops in the country will spell a disaster to our food security?
All the kinds of disasters that you talk about, rather right from Hiroshima to Chernobyl to 9/11 to 26/11, whatever you call it, will pale in front of the disaster that is awaiting us in case of food. And if we allow these companies to kind of manipulate the way they are trying to manipulate food, let me tell you, this is a disaster which society cannot comprehend, cannot even try to understand what is going to hit them and how hard it will hit them. And I think this is where we are trying to make the society aware that let us not willingly walk into that kind of a disaster. And when will we start? My question to you is, when will we start learning lessons from the previous or earlier disaster that the history has seen? Why not? Why don't we wake up and say that this world does not really require any more disasters? We all are fed up of disasters. If you want the terrorists to go away, please be sure there is also terrorism in food. And that terrorism should also go away.
If you happen to be the Minister of Agriculture, what will you do to address the problem? Because the people often say that the population is growing, and we need more food. We need to cultivate more food, and that's why we need new technology. So why basically you are opposing it?
Simple, ban it. India does not require this technology. The entire technology is being pushed on one major front, and that is that the world needs to produce more, so therefore we need genetically modified foods. Let me tell you, the world today is comprising of 6 billion plus population. Do we know that we produce food today in the world which is good enough for 12 billion people? Which means there is no dearth of food in the country. The only problem is that one part of the world is eating more, one part of the world has got less access to food. You will be surprised that in America, 62% of the population is clinically obese. In India, 62% of the population is malnourished. In America, there are more weight reduction clinics. In India, there are less ration shops in India. The challenge for us is to provide more ration shops, to provide more access to food. Then to give this illusion that there is shortage of food. There is no shortage of food. Secondly, it is being said by the GM industry that today in the world, 854 million people go to bed hungry. By 2015, the number of hungry in the world will have gone up to 1.4 billion. So therefore, the world needs to produce more, so therefore you need genetically modified crops. You know, it's very interesting. Everywhere, this is the kind of propaganda that is being unleashed by the industry. And every government accepts this. But the reality is, we don't even have one crop in the world, genetically modified crop, which produces more than what is being produced today. In fact, all the crops that have come into market so far, and most of them are genetically modified soybean and so on, and corn also, they are producing less than what is already existing. So which means genetically modified foods or crops are not actually producing more, they are producing less.
It is said that nearly 70% food produced in the US contains some kind of GM content in that. Given the fact that there are so many US food chains operating in our country, isn't it the risk that we are already eating the GM food?
Yes, we are already eating GM food. We have raised this question a number of times. Most of these kiosks that were selling sweet corn, most of these fruits that are coming into India, including corn, they are all genetically modified. Why I'm saying all genetically modified? Because they're coming from a place where they don't segregate genetically modified food with non-genetically modified foods. That is one. Secondly, India does not have any qualitative test facilities to see what is coming in does not contain genetically modified. So therefore, whatever is coming in is being accepted, and there is no way we can really see what is coming in, whether it is genetically modified or not.
What is it that you would like a common layperson to know about genetically modified food, and also how they can protect themselves? What consumers should do to protect themselves?
Well, I can tell you, the answer lies in you. You as a consumer, you have failed the society all these years. Whether it is cigarettes, whether it is alcohol, or whether it's all kinds of, whether it's trans fatty acids, everything that was unhealthy for us has been pushed onto you, and you have accepted it. It is now your time to stand up. It is now your time to stand up and be counted. Let me tell you, if you as a consumer stand up and exercise your voice that this is not the kind of food that you want, I can tell you all these companies will go away, and you will ensure a very healthy and an environmentally clean world, obviously, and plus a kind of a healthy future for us and for your own generations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Great pleasure.